My name is Alex, and I've always been a fan of the open road. There's something freeing about the highway, the endless stretch of pavement leading to unknown destinations. But the story I'm about to tell you isn't a romantic tale of adventure. It's a horrifying, true highway horror story that still haunts me to this day. It was a crisp autumn evening when my best friend Jake and I decided to take a road trip down Route 66. We'd been planning it for weeks, and the excitement had been building up within us. The plan was simple: start in Chicago and drive all the way to Los Angeles. Little did we know, our adventure would take an eerie turn. The first few days of the trip were exactly what we had hoped for. Singing along to classic rock songs, taking pictures at iconic landmarks, and stuffing our faces with greasy roadside food. We were carefree and full of life, driving through the heartland of America. But as we ventured further into the trip, things began to change. It started with strange occurrences in our motel rooms. Objects would move on their own, and eerie whispers filled the air, though we couldn't make out what they were saying. We chalked it up to fatigue and joked about how the ghosts of Route 66 were trying to spook us. One night, we stopped at a particularly run-down motel in the middle of nowhere. The place had an unsettling aura about it, but we were tired and figured it would only be for one night. The motel's owner, a grizzled old man named Hank, gave us a cold, unwelcoming stare as we checked in. As we settled into our room, I noticed a faded newspaper article on the wall. It spoke of a tragic accident that had occurred on Route 66 years ago. A family of 4 had perished in a horrific car crash, and their spirits were said to haunt the very stretch of the highway we were on. The article sent shivers down my spine, but I dismissed it as a mere urban legend. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside our door. I could hear whispering voices, and my heart raced as I shook Jake awake. We tiptoed to the door and peeked through the peephole, only to see nothing but an empty, dimly lit hallway. The following day, things took a sinister turn. As we drove, we began to notice a black car that seemed to be tailing us. No matter how fast we went or how many turns we took, it remained right behind us, its headlights glaring menacingly in our rearview mirror. I couldn't see the driver's face, but I knew something was terribly wrong. We decided to pull over at a gas station, hoping the car would pass us by. But it didn't. It parked a few spaces away, the engine idling ominously. Jake and I exchanged nervous glances before deciding to confront the driver. As we approached the car, a chill ran down my spine. The driver's window was cracked open just enough for us to see a pale, gaunt face staring back at us. It was a woman, but her eyes were empty, devoid of any emotion. She whispered something unintelligible, her voice a haunting melody of despair. We hurried back to our car and sped away, leaving the black car behind. But it didn't take long for it to catch up with us again. The highway seemed to stretch on forever, with no signs of civilization in sight. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped on this desolate stretch of road with a malevolent presence. Hours turned into days, and our supplies began to run low. The black car never left our side, and its driver never spoke comprehensible words. We were trapped in a never-ending nightmare. One night, as we drove in silence, the woman in the black car suddenly swerved in front of us, forcing us to brake hard. We skidded to a stop on the deserted highway, our hearts pounding in our chests. The woman emerged from her car, her face twisted into a grotesque, sinister grin. She pointed a bony finger at us and uttered a single word: "Stay." With that, she vanished into the darkness, leaving us alone on the haunted highway. We were terrified but had no choice but to heed her warning. For days we stayed on that forsaken stretch of Route 66, our spirits broken and our hope dwindling. We survived on what little food and water we had left, too afraid to venture further. Eventually the black car disappeared, and the highway seemed to return to its normal, abandoned state. We cautiously continued our journey, never speaking of the horrors we had encountered. To this day, I can't explain what happened on Route 66. Whether it was the restless spirits of that tragic family or something far more sinister, I may never know. But one thing is certain: I'll never look at the open road the same way again. The memories of that horrifying true highway horror story continue to haunt me, a reminder that not all adventures are meant to be taken lightly, and some roads are best left untraveled. It was a hot, humid summer evening in the heart of Oklahoma. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Route 79, the iconic highway that stretched seemingly endless through the barren landscape. I was driving alone, my hands gripping the steering wheel of my beat-up old Chevy. The radio buzzed with static, and the occasional pop song would break through the noise before fading away again. I was on my way to visit family, a long and monotonous drive that I had made countless times before. As I cruised down the desolate highway, my headlights cutting through the darkness, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. It was the kind of unease that comes from being alone on a deserted road in the dead of night, far from civilization. I shook off the feeling, chalking it up to fatigue and my overactive imagination. But as I continued to drive, that unease grew stronger. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was lurking just beyond the reach of my headlights. My heart began to race, and I scanned the darkness on either side of the road, searching for any sign of movement. There was nothing but the empty expanse of the Oklahoma plains. I turned up the radio, hoping that some music would help calm my nerves. The static crackled and hissed, and I was about to give up and turn it off when a voice suddenly broke through. It was a woman's voice, soft and soothing. "Are you lost, darling?" she asked. I nearly swerved off the road in surprise. I had been sure that I was the only one out here, but now it seemed I was not alone. I looked around, trying to pinpoint the source of the voice, but I saw nothing, just endless darkness. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Someone who can help you," the voice replied, "but you have to trust me." I hesitated, my grip on the steering wheel tightening. This was undoubtedly strange, but something about the woman's voice seemed strangely comforting. Maybe it was the isolation of the highway, or maybe it was the eerie feeling that I was being watched, but I decided to take a chance. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Keep driving," she said. "Just follow the road and I'll guide you." With a deep breath, I obeyed. I kept my eyes on the road, my headlights cutting a path through the darkness. The voice gave me directions, telling me when to turn and when to keep going straight. It was as if she knew every inch of the highway. As I followed her instructions, my unease began to fade. I felt strangely connected to this mysterious woman, as if she were a guardian angel guiding me through the night. But that feeling of being watched never quite disappeared. It was as if there were eyes on me, just out of sight. After what felt like hours, the voice instructed me to turn onto a narrow dirt road that led deep into the woods. The trees closed in around me, their branches scraping against the sides of my car. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, and I began to question my decision to follow the voice. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Trust me," the voice replied. "We're almost there." I continued down the winding dirt road, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, the trees parted, and I found myself in a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old, dilapidated house. It looked like something out of a horror movie, with boarded-up windows and a sagging roof. "Stop here," the voice said. I parked the car and got out, my legs trembling as I approached the house. The front door creaked open as if inviting me inside. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped over the threshold. The interior of the house was even more unsettling than the exterior. It was dark and musty, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I ventured further into the gloom. I could hear the voice guiding me, leading me deeper into the house. And then I saw her. A woman dressed in a tattered white gown stood at the top of a staircase. Her long, dark hair hung in front of her face, obscuring her features. She beckoned for me to come closer. I couldn't move. Fear paralyzed me as I stared at the woman on the stairs. The voice that had guided me here seemed to emanate from her, and I realized with a sinking feeling that I had been lured into a trap. "Who are you?" I stammered. The woman didn't answer, Instead, she began to descend the staircase, her hair parting to reveal a pale, gaunt face. Her eyes were empty, devoid of any emotion, and her lips curled into a sinister smile. I turned and ran, bolting out of the house and back to my car. I could hear her laughter echoing in my ears as I sped away, back down the dirt road and onto the highway. The voice was gone, but the feeling of being watched remained. I didn't stop driving until I reached the safety of my family's home. I never spoke of what had happened that night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something truly sinister. The memory of that eerie voice and the woman in the tattered gown haunted my dreams for years to come. To this day, I can't explain what happened on that desolate stretch of Route 79. All I know is that I'll never forget the horrifying, true highway horror story that unfolded on that fateful night. A story that continues to send shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. It was a cold, moonless night when it all began. I was driving alone on Route 13, a desolate highway that cut through miles of dense forest, connecting two small towns. The hum of my engine was the only sound in the stillness of the night, and the only company I had was the eerie glow of my headlights piercing through the darkness. I had heard the stories, the whispers among the locals about Route 13. They said it was cursed, haunted by the souls of those who had met gruesome fates on this very road. But I had always dismissed such tales as mere folklore until that night. The first sign that something was amiss came as I approached a bend in the road. In the distance, I saw a figure standing by the side of the highway. It was a woman, her long, disheveled hair blowing in the wind. She wore a tattered white dress that seemed to glow eerily in my headlights. My initial instinct was to stop and offer assistance, but a sudden chill ran down my spine, and a voice in my head urged me to keep driving. It was as if my very soul was warning me to stay away. I increased my speed, my heart pounding in my chest as I stole one last glance at the woman in the rearview mirror. As I continued down the highway, the feeling of unease did not dissipate. In fact, it intensified. Shadows danced on the periphery of my vision, and I could have sworn I heard faint whispers in the wind. My hands clenched the steering wheel as I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled over me like a shroud. Up ahead, I saw another figure, this time a man, standing in the middle of the road. His eyes were wide and vacant, and he seemed to be staring right through me. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt just a few feet away from him. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice trembling. The man didn't respond. He simply continued to stare, his mouth hanging open, emitting no sound except for a low, guttural moan. Panic coursed through my veins as I realized that something was terribly wrong. I couldn't explain it, but there was an unnatural aura about him. I threw the car into reverse and swerved around him, my tires screeching on the pavement. As I sped away, I glanced back in my rearview mirror, and to my horror, the man had vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but the echoing sound of his haunting moan. My heart was racing, and my mind was filled with a growing sense of dread. I knew I needed to get out of there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were following my every move. The road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, an unending abyss of darkness. I had lost all sense of time, and the forest that lined the highway seemed to close in around me, like a suffocating embrace. My headlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the gnarled trees that loomed overhead. Then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw it, a dilapidated rust-covered sign that read, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." It was a warning, a message from the other side. I had heard stories of this sign, tales of how it marked the point of no return, the gateway to a realm where the living were not welcome. I had no choice but to press on, my foot heavy on the gas pedal. The highway seemed to twist and turn, leading me deeper into the heart of the darkness. My headlights flickered again, and this time they went out completely, plunging me into pitch blackness. Panic set in as I fumbled for my phone, desperately trying to turn on its flashlight. The feeble beam revealed the nightmarish sight before me. A gaunt, ghostly figure stood in the middle of the road, its eyes like empty sockets, its skeletal hand reaching out toward me. I screamed and swerved the car to the side, narrowly avoiding a collision. My heart hammered in my chest as I tried to regain control of the vehicle. When I looked back, the figure had disappeared once more, leaving me with a lingering sense of dread. With trembling hands, I finally managed to restart the car and continue down the highway. But the horrors didn't end there. The road seemed to stretch on forever, an endless nightmare of twisted, distorted reality. I saw more ghostly apparitions, heard eerie whispers in the wind, and felt an overwhelming sense of malevolence closing in around me. I couldn't take it any longer. I had to escape this nightmarish place, this cursed highway that seemed to defy all reason and logic. I pushed my car to its limits, driving faster and faster, until the highway finally gave way to a blinding white light. And then, as suddenly as it had all begun, I found myself back on the familiar road, the cursed Route 13. My heart was still pounding, my body covered in a cold sweat. I couldn't believe what I had just experienced. Had it all been a dream, a hallucination brought on by fatigue? But as I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw them. The ghostly figures, the haunting faces of the lost souls who still roamed the highway. They were there, just out of reach, a chilling reminder that some horrors are all too real. I drove on in silence, haunted by the memory of that night, the night I had come face to face with the true horrors of Route 13, and I knew, deep down, that I would never be the same again.